another player. Sherman's a chump. Act like a pro. You love Colin to rail on hat-on backwards guy. This is no different. Stephen in California, Stephen, it is. I don't rail on hat-on backwards guy. I rail on hat-on backwards quarterback. That's a leadership position. At least Stephen be accurate. That's why I'm not a Kaepernick is going to be a legendary player. He's a legendary talent. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck are hat-on forward guys. Matt Stafford and Kaepernick, backwards and sideways. I judge quarterbacks different than receivers and corners. By the way, Richard Sherman was a sports coat and a bow tie after games. Stanford educated. I defend players who play keyed-up positions, linebacker, corner, wide receiver, 1 second after the biggest play of the game. Yes, he didn't swear. He wasn't vulgar. What do I tell my kids? I don't know, they're your kids, not my issue. Figure out, it's called parenting. Turn the TV off, redo them. There is so much money in finding the next young star. Music, entertainment, sports. That's where agents make their money. That's where Adidas, Nike, Puma make their money. It's where P. Diddy makes his money. It's where all these guys make their money. It's where Hollywood makes their money. Find the next star. We are just massively inundated with the next young it. Man, woman, child, doesn't matter. That's where all the money's at. And in the process, ESPN the magazine even has an issue called The Next, where we find the next something. We overlook people who develop later. We forget that Chris Rock was at Saturday Night Live for 3 years, invisible. Went to In Living Color, invisible. Then became Muhammad Ali in stand-up on stage, 7 years later. Tina Fey, 9 years, Saturday Night Live, invisible. Then she wrote 30 Rock, mid to late 30s. Great show. Just bitingly funny. We forget that Jane Lynch, 51, Martha Stewart, mid-40s. We forget that stuff. We forget that John Wooden was a late bloomer. Took John Wooden 16 years to win his first championship. Because our society, more than ever, is into making money off the young, we forget that a lot of people are late bloomers. New York sports fans have already branded Pete Carroll a loser. But unlike a lot of fans, Pete Carroll has evolved. Pete Carroll in the toughest division now, 38-26, and that's moving up. His first go-around, he was a .500 coach, and that was taking over a great New England team. The bottom line is, with so much money in finding the next star, we often overlook writers, coaches, artists, architects, teachers, academics, landscapers who are 39 and 49 and 51. Trent Dilfer talked about this yesterday with Pete Carroll. He found himself and a philosophy in his 50s.
There is a wisdom that Pete accumulated that a lot of these other coaches don't have. And Pete developed his coaching methodology late into his career, this Win Forever. Please go look it up. I mean, he's written a book. There's a website about it. It's called Win Forever.
Is that Yogi Ross stuff?
Yogi and Pete developed this together, and it's real. It's taking Pete's life experiences. I don't want to steal from their stuff, but taking his life experiences in the coaching world and saying what truly allows players to be their best.
Peter King's going to join us next and talk about that. All right, we bring Peter King on, and I really want to get into this stuff because a lot of East Coast people look at Pete Carroll and are like, he was a failure. Out west with Seattle and USC, they look at Pete Carroll as kind of the bomb. And Peter King's joining us to Herd on ESPN Radio. I'd argue he found himself at USC. So, Peter, tell me about the Pete Carroll you knew before USC and the Pete Carroll you know now.
I remember Pete Carroll used to, the Jets used to train out on Long Island at Hofstra. And that was where their facility was. So they had training camp out there, and during the season, you'd go out there. And I remember the year that Pete Carroll was the coach there, 1994, going out there, and he would play pickup basketball games. They put a basketball hoop up out in the parking lot, or, it's like the whole place was a parking lot. But they put a basketball hoop up out there, and Pete Carroll would go out and they'd have pickup games out there. I mean, Pete Carroll's a jock. Pete Carroll he's an athlete. He is just a guy who, given his druthers, is going to want to surround himself with athletes and play the kind of athletic game with athletic players that he's playing right now. The real Pete Carroll, in my opinion, surfaced on the West Coast at USC when he could go out to high schools and find the most athletic kids and said, son, we're going to make you a star. And that's what he did at USC, and that's what he's done with the Seahawks.
Richard Sherman writes a column for you on MondayMorningQuarterback.com, which we read yesterday on the air, most of it. He ended up apologizing for his comments. I defended him initially because I think the media can be intrusive right after games. Should he have apologized?
Well, look, in my opinion, I think particularly for the choking gesture,
yeah,
you know, that's classless. That's ridiculous to do that. And I have never been, Colin, I'm 56 years old. I grew up in white bread America. I love, and I wish the NFL did it. I love what the NHL does at the end of every playoff series where guys who hate each other's guts have to shake hands after a game. I love that. That's what I think sports and sportsmanship is about. So am I going to like what Richard Sherman does? Absolutely not. But whether I like it or not, it's real. That's what happens in games.
Yes.
And although I would, you know, and I'm sure that Pete Carroll and or John Schneider did this, talked to Richard Sherman yesterday about what happened without any question in my mind. But and I would too. I would tell him, you can't do that. We're not going to do that. That's not going to be the face of our team. And so while all that happened, in my opinion, I do think that there is some, you know, we at the MMQB yesterday talked to two sociologists about why the Richard Sherman phenomenon was so gigantic in the 24 hours after the game. And I think a lot of people really, really felt like, you know, you never see unvarnished football players, ever. It was like Aaron Andrews had walked out into the middle of the field, stood in the end zone after he batted the ball away and say, hey, Richard, what did you think? Remember the old XFL days?
Yeah.
When reporters could be out on the field interviewing players during games?
I miss those days, Peter.
Hey, by the way, I got a good story for you. Paris Lennon, linebacker for the Denver Broncos. He played for the Memphis Maniacs. He is the last remaining guy from the XFL in the NFL, and he'll be in the Super Bowl. So get him on.